clear, or it's your first essay and you don't remember how to write one, or you just don't know where to start. So they'll be able to support you there as well. Sorry, I know I'm going on tangents, but I'm just trying to give you as much information as possible in the first week. And then as your needs and questions arise, I'll be able to keep mentioning things that I think would be of use to you guys. Okay, anything else that you can think of that came about, that you're having questions, either about this course or just generally speaking? You're good to go. You can ask in the chat as well if you prefer. Okay, all right, so we'll get started with like the second half of the intro to this course tonight. So like I said, it's super laid back, informal this week because we're talking about transition. So I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too much info and things to do this week. But I want to go over some of, oh boy, sorry, she's playing on the bed behind me. So who knows what that's going to amount to. I want to go over some of your answers, some of the things that we will be doing in the class. And then if any point you have questions, I don't know how many people got a chance to look at the syllabus, excuse me, the syllabus on D2L or the assignment criteria, but I did post them there. Has anyone had the time to look at that yet? No, maybe so. Okay, so take the weekend. I haven't really figured out how I want to organize it exactly, but this is what it looks like for our course. So I don't remember what picture I picked. I think it says learning on it, something like that. So that's our course. And I think I'm going to go by week, which is kind of like by topic at the same time. So I put week 1 with the topic. So you have the syllabus here in PDF form, the assignment. So 2 of the 3 main assignments of this course are there. So essay criteria is all the questions you had Tuesday about like number of pages, things like that. The topic, that's in the criteria. And then the rubric, for those who are not familiar with what a rubric looks like, I think most of, I don't know if you call it something else. En français, c'est une grille d'évaluation. So this is specifically what I'm going to evaluate in the essay, and the essay draft and final version are using the exact same rubric because you're kind of doing the work. You're not submitting 2 assignments, 2 different assignments. You're going to submit the same essay twice with improvements. So this is what the rubric looks like. So like I'm checking those boxes, making sure that you've done these things based on this particular criteria, this criteria. So I put APA and MLA, but like I said, I know that it was potentially gibberish on Tuesday. I'm open to other citation methods and formats. Just you need to be consistent. You can't have a title page if you're using MLA. So like you have to consistently use one throughout the entire essay. But again, we'll get to that at some point when we're talking about the essay. And then I've given you some resources to help you with essay outlines and templates and things like that, a general structure. We will go over all of this in due time within the course, but I like to give students just like a little heads up if you want to start planning or thinking about an essay. And then the portfolio is the other big assignment that is there. So that was combined and I didn't separate the pages. So the criteria is all here. And then the rubric is below. So the one that's missing is the information for the debates. Had a look at it and I want to do some minor tweaks. So that will be posted next week and all under the same tab. So I'll put the information that you guys wanted immediately will be under assignments. And then anything else that's going to be specific to the week will be under the week. So like critical thinking is part of the skills that you need for your argumentative essay, but the resources will be under the week. I think it's week 4, if that makes sense. So if ever you're not sure, just let me know and I'll show you where to find the resources. And then for week 1, which is Tuesday and today, the survey and the expectation, which is you all did fill out already anyways. The PowerPoint is there if you want to follow along. And then I'll explain what these are. So that's what you're going to need for this week. So it'll all be under every week. Make sense? Okay, any questions before I move on? Good to go? You guys look exhausted. Is it like, do you have long days, or is it just getting back into the groove of things? I don't know if this is your concentrated faces or what, but just let me know if you need anything. And I realize that, listen, I don't know when people have dinner, but like, feel free if you need a snack or whatever, go for it. All right, so for the transition to university and course expectations, based on, like I said, the questions that you had answered in that Google Doc, I very much appreciated the fact that most of you expect from each other and from me respect, a really welcoming and open environment. So I appreciate that you put it there, because that's, I hope, the goal for all profs. But yeah, so respect for everyone involved, respect for the way people express themselves, their answers, their points of view. Those are all obviously, they're just human traits that we all have. What you expect from this course, again, it was a lot of research and writing skills. So I'm not teaching you necessarily how to write. This is not an English course. That's why it's not under the English department. But again, to reiterate what I said Tuesday, it's mostly my focus is going to be how to formulate the arguments, make sure that there's flow to your ideas, make sure that I can understand what you're writing, and then you can go search for additional supports if you need something that's more, that's more a more targeted support. So that's where the writing coaches will come in, but I'll be able to flag, generally speaking, like let's say you have verb subject agreement issues, I can flag that generally speaking, and then I can direct you to additional supports if that's something you want to work on. Other than reading and writing, research and writing skills, there was a lot of time management that came up. And just general study skills. So those are all things that we will address in this course. And if you have any experience that you want to share, or suggestions or things that didn't work, this is the place to do it. So I will be sharing, like I said, my experiences, one as a student, but also all the experience that I gained working with students. And then from the instructor, a lot of it was just being there for you and being able to personalize some of the supports. So like I said, by email, after class, whatever you need, hopefully I'll be able to provide it or direct you to the person or resource. Okay, so I just wanted to go over briefly what you guys put in there, and then go over my expectations in this course. So that's why I appreciated you having put respect, because it's there. Especially because we're all coming from different backgrounds and different experiences. We have mature students who are coming from degrees and diplomas elsewhere, and we have my little newbies that it's their first semester in university. So just respect where everyone's coming from and their backgrounds, cultural, linguistic, even regional. Attendance and punctuality. So far, everyone who is here on Tuesday is here today. So you guys have punctuality down pat, and attendance is good. If ever you have to miss for whatever reason, just send me a quick email. And I'll have all of the resources and everything that you missed on D2L. And if you need like a one-on-one just for me to go over it with you, I'm happy to do that sometime during the week. For participation, basically you guys being present is a big part of it, but don't be afraid and shy to ask questions, the chat, and all the other functions in Zoom. Completing your participation is also completing your assignments and doing so on time. And for the most part, I realize that not everyone's comfortable doing it. There are technical issues, but it is kind of nice to see your faces. So I appreciate those who are able to put their cameras on. And yeah, just let me know. Just tell me if something's not going well. Ask your questions. I don't know what you don't know. I don't know what's not clear. I don't know what you need help with if you're not telling me. So as long as we keep that communication open between me and you, I don't see you having any issues in this course. Specifically for virtual learning, I had to add this slide. basically things that are inappropriate in class are going to also be inappropriate on Zoom. So that's pretty common sense. And just let's have a little patience for everyone. Like I said, I don't have all the technological answers. Stuff might happen. I might have to disappear for a minute. If you guys have to disappear and come back, it's all good. So just hopefully you seem like a good group for this, that you'll patiently wait out any technical issues we may have. For the last thing I wanted to touch on before we get into more specifics is just general email etiquette. We haven't had any communication by email yet. So I like to start with this in this course because at this point you haven't really, I don't think, communicated with any profs, but email etiquette is going to be a big deal. I have profs and colleagues who will refuse to answer an email from a student who doesn't follow just like the basics of email etiquette. And I know for a lot of people, this is common sense and things that you might actually already do. It is worth the reminder because every year after I go through this, I have students who email me a document. That's the whole email. I don't have a subject line. I don't have a context. It's a document. Okay, so some of the do's and don'ts, which you might already do in your professional lives as well. So I like this example because it's a nice starting off point. A couple of things. We have a Gmail system at Laurentian. So we ask that you use your Gmail account. That's how we find you in our systems, is with your Laurentian Gmail account. So be sure to use that when communicating with profs and be sure to check it. I know that some students will have the LU Gmail sent to another email. It's fine. That's fine. But our communications have to, for the most part, have to come through the LU Gmail account, not just because it's easier for us to identify you and communicate with you, but we have really high spam filters. And sometimes if your email is coming from something that's not recognized through the organization, it's going to go in the junk mail. So that's just a general rule of thumb for all communications that you're going to do in Laurentian, at Laurentian. But specifically with your profs, just make that clear that that's going to be your LU account. Make sense? I assume everyone has their LU account set up and you're good to go. You don't have any Gmail questions. Okay. Not that I have the answers. Something else, a subject line. Okay. We have to know what you're talking about before we actually open the email. All right. So we're not asking for a sentence. I've had students who have sent me URLs in the subject line. No, please. It's like the title of your email. Okay. So just make sure that you have a subject and it's not just assignment. I mean, that's a good start, this example. But it doesn't give me a context. Assignment. I could be a prof teaching 3 courses. What assignment? What are you talking about? Is it well, sorry, my brain hasn't fully shut off the French side yet. A summative assessment, is it formative? Is it, a quiz, whatever the case may be as specific as you can in the subject line so that I know how to prioritize your emails. If it's, sick or, urgent versus an assignment, that doesn't motivate me to read it as a prof. Okay, you need like a hello, a salutation at the beginning of your email. We don't want a book. If you're anything like, I think at this point, if it's more than a paragraph, everyone just scrolls or ignores. So like get to the point, be concise. Some profs will expect, and if they don't tell you, you don't have to assume this, but like give them either in your signature or at the beginning of your email, like the context of who you are and what class it is. Some will ask you to do that in the subject line, but just kind of tell them who you are, whether, like I said, in your signature, in your subject line, or at the beginning of your email. Well, I might be teaching 5 Justins. Like that's not going to help me know who you are and what's the support and like hat that I have to wear if I'm, it's my computer science course versus my math course. So be as specific as you can and identify yourself for the prof. Some people will put their student number in their email. That's a personal preference, but just know that identifies you. That is it's like your SIN, but for school. So that's something that some students are not comfortable doing. So I'm not telling you that you have to put that signature in, that's a choice that you can make, but keep that in mind as well. Just we need some way of finding you. And again, sorry, Beth, I'm going to use you. Whatever your preferred name is might not match the class list, so we have to know who you are at some point in that email. Okay, so just be clear, concise, to the point, and ask. If it's a question, ask your question. If it's I need a meeting, request a meeting, provide some times for that meeting. But just make sure that it's not a one line. This doesn't even have a capital letter. Like it's not a full sentence. You don't have a capital on the I, which needs capital regardless of where it is in the sentence. That's a whole other issue. Okay? I know that that's straightforward and probably stuff you do already, but just keep that in mind. Any questions about emails to profs and things like that? I think that's pretty straightforward. Good to go? Okay. So for tonight, these are nope, that's not the right one, but yes, these are the 4 goals for tonight. These are the 4 points of discussion, and then we finish early. Like I said, the first week's let's just get into the groove. So what to expect at the post-secondary level? What does that culture look like? The culture and environment and community of learning at the university level. We'll talk a little bit about mindsets, go over some academic integrity scenarios so that you have a sense of not necessarily where the line is, but where some of the, sometimes we're not sure. So we're going to go through some scenarios that have like a little bit of gray area in them. And then we'll finish with emotional intelligence. So those are the 4 things that I want to talk about tonight. And I'll be doing that for every PowerPoint discussion. I'll try, if I forget, let me know, but I'll try and tell you, okay, this is what we're doing tonight. Okay, so I found a picture that I liked that described the culture of post-secondary education. I don't know if anyone can find a different interpretation, but really you chose to be here. You chose to be a student at the university level. So you bear a lot of the responsibility, and you are responsible for your learning. So to me, that's what that was, because you can choose not to be here. You can choose to miss class, but you're responsible. You have to deal with the consequences of those choices. So everybody is here, and for the most part, not for the most part, you're all adult learners. You're all motivated to be here for your own reasons. So keep those in mind when you're going through your university courses. A lot of the other things that are, I don't want to say different, but maybe it's like the next level, or you've built off of something, a skill or a knowledge base that you have previously. It's for the most part independent learning. Yes, we're here as profs to kind of give you either theory, examples, the how to do something. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to work with that information, work with that knowledge, build off of it, and develop the skills. So the expression, like, we're not going to hold your hand for the most part, and you have to tell us if there's something you don't understand. Hopefully your profs will try and find the information elsewhere, or give you the example and explain it in a different way, or find different ways of helping you understand. But especially, just because Devin, you're the one who said it, for a completely online course where you don't have, I don't want to say imposed, but like scheduled time with your profs, you've got to figure a lot of this out on your own and I got students in classes who go and find videos from Khan Academy or YouTube or things where you're trying to kind of understand the material yourself. So I'm not saying it goes to that extent necessarily, but you're going to be given information and given the skills and things, and you have to be able to work with that on your own. I assume at this point you're all aware that it's going to be an increased workload. Just by show of hands, does anyone work as well as study right now this semester? Okay, so Justin and Beth. Okay, so your workload is even more, especially if you tack on kids, families, travel to and from. I don't know if you're physically leaving the house. There's a lot of things that are going to play into that, right?
Yeah, sadly to say, it's not my first go around. I went to college, as now my mic is working today. And so yeah, it's a peach, but you deal with it, right?
Yeah, and everyone's going to deal with it in a way that makes sense to them, right? But just being aware of the fact that you're all dealing with your own things. Everyone has different things in their life and in their schedule, and you're it's not like you get a well, I mean, I guess you sort of do, but you don't get a timetable where you have to be here at this time every single day. You have to figure that out on your own. So hopefully I can give you some tips and strategies to help. But especially if you have experience already, or you know what works and what doesn't. I'm not here to tell you, not all the time. I'm not always going to be like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. These are just some of your options. The work is more challenging in that we're expecting a lot more of you, and a lot of it, like I said, is done on your own. We're going to go over higher level thinking in thinking skills. I don't know if people have heard of Bloom's taxonomy already, but that's the pyramid of thinking skills that we're going to go over. And it just goes beyond what was expected of you, especially if we're comparing it to high school. A lot of high school students remember having to memorize things. Like I had to know the elements on the periodic table. I can still name you the 21st elements. I can't tell you what any of them do or how to use them in a different setting because I just memorized them. Well, okay, sometimes that will still be the case in university, but we're expecting you to be able to build off of that knowledge base and be able to analyze, reflect, apply that in a different context and see the uses beyond just memorizing a definition. It's a lot of being able to apply that knowledge. So that's kind of what we're expecting of you at the university level, not necessarily in your first week of your first course, but your program should also be built that way. Your first year courses give you the foundation and build off of that in your second, third, and fourth year. Well, that's how the pyramid works, is that you have to have the knowledge first, but then you have to be able to use it and apply it and recreate that particular knowledge in a different setting that's not necessarily academic. Time management is going to be a challenge for pretty much everyone, me included. So that's something to continuously check in with. I'm pretty sure time management is next week. Gosh, I should look at that. But we'll go over some how to create a schedule, some of the considerations that you should have in mind when you're creating your schedule, and then how to kind of go in and reassess more frequently than you think, to be able to make sure that you're maximizing your time without stressing or overwhelming yourself. And then diverse culture is, you're being exposed to people from you're being exposed to different cultures. You're working with people who don't necessarily come from the same place as you, that have been raised in the same educational system as you. Language is definitely something that we can all, I think there were, now I don't remember, 4 or 5 different languages at least that we speak among our group. So all of those things will play into your experience, and hopefully positively affect change in how you approach university learning. All right, so this is the last that I wanted to talk about, just kind of like the culture and expectations at the university level. So I don't know, I think we're not the norm with this course, that we're year 20 students registered, but I think we've established there's 13 of you who are going to show up. That's a super small class size for a university course. So that's something that is a big mental obstacle for students, is just the sheer number of students that are in your courses. So if we take, for example, a first year chem course, you're in the hundreds. You might not be at that. You're going to lose. Your numbers are going to dwindle by the time you hit your 4th, 5th, 6th year. But class sizes is a big thing for a lot of students to kind of get used to, because it's a lot less one-on-one for the most part, and the profs may or may not even know your name by the end of the course, because they're dealing with that many 100 students in your class times, I don't know, they teach 3 intro classes. So that's going to play into how you have to let us know what's working and what doesn't. Unfortunately, profs won't necessarily change their way of delivering information for one particular student. But there are ways that hopefully we can talk about strategies to help you in those kinds of courses where it's a lot of students. Attendance and punctuality. This course is a little bit different. I do track attendance. Some profs don't. Some profs do. Attendance for the most part, attendance shows in the assignments that you submit, whether or not you've been attending class, even if profs aren't physically checking off your names on a list. I just do it because this course, I forgot to say it on Tuesday, but some students are required or like highly recommended to use this course. And I have to track it for those purposes anyways, to be able to have like an accountability at the end of the course that says, yes, X student attended all of the classes. So I'm upfront about it. I do take attendance, but it's more so for those purposes than anything else. If you're not sure, you can always ask your prof. Do you take attendance? Is attendance mandatory? They should have that policy in their I was going to say textbook, in their syllabus. Thank you. You may all have to translate a word for me every now and then. So by the end of this, you'll all know some French words. So scheduling and class hours. So you can't, it's not a negotiation. Class is 4 to 5:30. You can't just be like, no, I'm gonna see you at this time. No, and scheduling is your own to do. So when we talk about time management, we're going to talk about some of the strategies for how to schedule study time, how to schedule reviews and things like that, different options. Level of understanding, that's Bloom's, so we'll get back to that. Course load assignments and assessments. I try my very best. If you guys are overloaded in general, I'd like to think I'm pretty flexible with due dates. Not like you can just hand it in whenever, but if you let me know in advance, you're like, I got a lot due this week. Can we push it back? Can we talk about it? Yes. Not everyone is going to be like that. You might end up with 3 assignments due on the same day. I don't know how exams are going to work, but sometimes I had students that had two exams in the same day for like 3 days in a row. So there's a lot that might happen at the same time that you just can't escape. So there are hopefully strategies we can talk about that might help that. And then the last one that a lot of students, for those of you who are like not coming directly from high school, so anyone above the age of 18, the parent involvement in your university studies is 0. So as a university employee, as a professor, I cannot share anything that has to do with you with your parents. So we have parents that I was an academic advisor before. We had parents calling in all the time. I want to know what my son, daughter's grades are. That's great. You have to talk to your son or daughter. Unless you give the university permission to divulge information to someone, and you have to specify that particular person's name and information. We cannot share any information with anyone when they're asking about it. Like, we'll share information potentially between a department if it's to support you, or if someone is at risk. But generally speaking, nobody has your information. It belongs to you. So you can choose to share whatever you want with whoever you want. But as a professor and as an institution, we can't do that. I've had parents wanting to meet me to discuss their student's final grade, their child, my student's final grade. Sorry, if the student doesn't allow me to do that, and if the student is not present, nope. So that's a big change for a lot of students who think that, anyone can just ask for any kind of information, which is why your student number doesn't necessarily appear anywhere anymore, apart from on WebAdvisor. Is it still called WebAdvisor? No, you guys have the new student
self-service.
Self-service. Thank you. That thing. That's where you'll find your student number, but that's your identity, and we can't share anything with anybody else. Okay. Any questions about that, or things that I maybe missed, or questions you might still have about what the general expectations at university are? A lot of you aren't first year students, so I know that some of you have the answers already. Good to go? Okay. Has anyone ever heard of the growth? Oh, no, sorry. I forget about this slide. So Employability Skills 2000. Hopefully these are, it's just a slide there so that I don't forget. Hopefully these are the things that we'll be developing throughout the course. And if you there's the actual term and the concept of the skills that employers are looking for in this century. So a lot of this is has gone even beyond this particular tableau, this particular chart table. Whoa. So a lot of the skills you can look for 2020, 2021 employability skills, or skills that employers are looking for. That's one of the goals of this course, is so that you're able to develop the skills that they're looking for as potential or future employees at a particular company, institution, wherever you're going to end up work-wise. Which pretty much everyone, your goals, your career goals are very much in line with your areas of study. Sometimes we study something and you're planning on going somewhere else in a different field or discipline, but for the most part, everyone in this course, I'm studying law because I want to be a lawyer. Perfect. Doesn't mean that's the only way of going about doing things, especially since I have an undergrad in law. I don't have my JD, but that's not what I'm doing, clearly. So just be open to the different possibilities, because you're going to be developing skills that employees are looking for, not necessarily, depending on the field, they're not necessarily looking for the knowledge of a particular field. They're looking that you can develop, you have the skills that they need, and then you can learn the rest on the job. That's what happened in my job. There isn't even a degree for the job that I do at But I have the skills, and the rest I learn as I go. So for the topic of mindset, okay, so I don't know who's heard of this before, but there's a difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. And I have a fixed mindset when it comes to certain things. So it's more just being aware of how you're thinking and approaching different maybe situations in which you're living, events that happen, and kind of changing your perspective and your attitude facing that thing and moving forward, how you're going to adapt. So a growth mindset is the fact that you can control not what happens to you, but how you're going to react, or how you, like I said, going to adapt in the future. So it's the fact that everyone has talent and intelligence. Everyone can develop that further. So it's the fixed mindset. If we go to this example, it's the fact that it's not necessarily a question of I'm smart, I'm dumb, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. So a fixed mindset is really putting yourself in a little box and saying, I can't do anything about this. Okay, maybe, but for the most part, you can kind of switch your attitude, your mindset, and have a more positive, for lack of a better word, attitude and approach. So I like this picture because it kind of shows, tell me I'm smart versus tell me I try hard. So is it the fact that you lack intelligence that you weren't able to accomplish a certain thing? Or is it the fact that you lacked experience, or maybe you needed to try a different way of doing things? So it's just being aware of how you're thinking and approaching things. And maybe you already have a really well-developed growth mindset. But most of the time I can, on the daily, find myself in a situation where I've put myself in a yes-no situation where it's good or bad, or whatever the dichotomy is. So it's just being aware of that, because it shouldn't stop you, especially at the university level. You're not expected to know everything right now. So it's the fact that you're here to learn and being open to learning, hopefully will help you. So to that end, I have one scenario that I found that I really liked, because I personally have lived it, and I think a lot of us have as well. So, sorry, I assume that's me. We're just going to ignore the little notifications. So if, let's say someone your child enters a particular sports competition, for example. A lot of you put sports as your hobbies and preferences. So let's say we enter a sports competition of some kind, and either your kid, whoever is in the competition, does their best, but doesn't win. So how would you respond to that person? So whether I'm not necessarily looking for for you to answer me in a growth mindset, what would be a reaction that you've heard, you've seen, or something that you might say if it were, let's say, your friend, your sister, your sibling, your child? What would you say to that person who did their best but didn't win a competition. How do you react to that? Obviously, this person is disappointed and they're looking for some kind of reaction from you. What would you say or do?
You won't always get to win everything. You can have the experience and then try to improve for the future time that you can better. Like, I didn't know that I was going to go into nursing. I started with computer science because I wanted to experiment being a university student. And then now I can realize that I want to be in the nursing program. So I put the goal and I am trying to apply for nursing program again. And I got into LU nursing program again, but I'm still having like higher goals to like apply for other programs, to better nursing programs also. So it's just that you won't get what you want always for the first time.
Yeah, that's definitely one way of approaching it. And the fact that just because you enter a competition doesn't mean you're guaranteed first place, right? Or any, I don't know if it's a podium finish or whatever. You're not guaranteed to win just because you've entered the competition and you've prepared yourself potentially as best you can. So I like this example or this analogy because it does apply. You can apply it to an academic setting where it's like, I studied the best that I could, and I'm still not getting the result, the note, the grade that I was looking for. Well, is it necessarily a question of intelligence? Or is it more of a question of how did you prepare? How do you prepare differently? Those kinds of things that will affect that. Sorry, I didn't know how to do the chat without seeing everybody, without losing my shared screen. So Beth, that's a really good way of approaching it, is what did you do well? So that's a switch in mindset. Okay, you didn't win, but what did you do well? What are your takeaways? So kind of like what Beirut was saying as well, you did learn something. What did you learn? So it seems like a simplistic example, but I think we've all been there where it's like, yeah, but I can picture either someone telling me or me wanting to tell someone, but I think you did really well. But how does that help the person further develop or improve? Justin?
Start with, I guess you have to figure out what the mindset of the person is. So if we're talking about a kid, like I have a 20-year-old now, but I also have an 8-year-old. Obviously, you're going to talk to both of them differently.
Absolutely. That's a really good point.
We're in, to keep it simple, I'd give them something constructive that they did well at. So you kind of prop them up a little bit because they're obviously down. But at the same time, too, you're going to give them something that is a constructive point where what they didn't do well in, without ripping them apart, but just a little bit. And then it gives them something to work towards next time. And most of the time, if you're in a sport, you're not so much analyzing yourself. You're there to play the game. So they're not going to watch what they did wrong. And if there's something you've noticed that they're really falling behind in, point that out in a gentle tone. And then that's something they can work towards. They can set themselves goals, prop themselves higher up, and do better next time.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of great things that you mentioned there. And obviously the person to whom you're talking, the message that you're giving and the wording that you use will definitely differ. And when you're talking to young kids, some people, I'm not saying everybody, we have this mentality, and I know that lately or we hear it a lot more in this particular generation of, well, we don't want them, how did they word that? We don't want them to fear failure, and we want to protect them from failing. But that's not helping anybody. So it's like Justin said, it's the fact that, okay, but, and most of you, how can we focus on the things that you did well, and then being honest enough to say, okay, but clearly you didn't do exactly what was expected of you, or clearly there's room for improvement if you didn't win. So if the goal of that particular person, and an 8-year-old versus a 20-year-old, the 8-year-old might want to be doing this competitively, maybe the 20-year-old or vice versa is just doing it for fun. The intention behind that is also going to impact how you're perceiving the situation. So if this person is doing it for fun, great. Well, then did you have fun? Then your goal is accomplished. If your goal was to improve, okay, how do we do that? Something didn't go according to plan, or you didn't meet the criteria that was needed to be able to win. How do we get there? What are the things that we can do? You need to work harder. You need to improve X. You need to improve this. So it's that type of switch in mentality of, well, I give up. or well, I'm not good enough. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, some people are born with certain abilities, but you can further develop them. It could have been my first competition, and I was up against people who've been doing that particular sport for years. That plays into it as well. So it's just kind of taking a moment to reflect on how you're thinking, and is it helping you or is it hindering you? Is it stopping you from doing something? So that's more or less what, when we're talking about mindsets, is where is the improvement? How can you do better next time? Or maybe there was some kind of issue that you need to address, but it's the fact that you're taking the time to identify that. Okay, I totally lost my thingy. I'm really scared. I'm just going to be honest. I'm really scared of using the PowerPoint and then losing all the rest of the features, so I don't use it as like I'll promise I'll work on it, but the whole present mode scares me. Yeah. Okay. So I put here some more examples of different scenarios and how like there's no necessarily right or wrong way to react, but some possible ways to address situations. So if you feel so inclined, go for it. That's what that website is for. So the reason I talk about mindset first is because you have to have that more growth mindset approach to be able to talk about the different types of intelligence, in the sense that I say successful intelligence. It's not like 100%. It's not like perfect. It's just, how do you become successful, and how do you successfully use all of these types of intelligence? So we're going to go into this, not in this particular diagram form. We're going to go into the different types of intelligence in a week or two, and what they all mean, how they how they how they are in line with this course. But yeah, so there's practical, critical, or analytical. Those are synonyms. And creative thinking. Everybody has those types of intelligences, and everyone can further develop that type of intelligence or thinking. We talk about practical thinking, creative thinking, and critical thinking. And together, way back when, the textbook called it successful intelligence, but I liked that way of thinking about it. So we'll come back to that, but you have to be aware of the type of mindset that you have first, to then be open to the different types of thinking, and how to improve those skills. So that's already 2 of the 4 topics for tonight. Are there any questions so far? Good to go? Justin.
More of a statement. I can already tell you, as me as an example, I would consider myself to be an extremely analytical or critical thinker. Practical, fairly most of the time. Creative, I could tell you, I'm not as imaginary anymore as my 8-year-old is.
I mean, I absolutely, but I'm going to keep that in mind when we talk about it, because we have preconceived notions of what those 3 types of thinking are. And a lot of this whole course is based on like self-discovery. So you will be answering like quizzes or surveys, questionnaires, whatever you want to call them, to get a sense of where you're at. So when Justin answers the questionnaire, he may very well have exactly the results that he just said. But hopefully by the end of this course, everything might improve, because the goal is, in certain situations, obviously you're going to need more analytical thinking. But it doesn't mean you can't also be not dependent on, but that you couldn't also employ creative or practical thinking skills. So it's a really cool scenario that I like to use when we talk about these skills. So just keep that in mind. I would consider myself, my weakest is definitely analytical, critical thinking. That I don't have that. It doesn't come naturally to me. It doesn't mean I can't develop those skills or utilize them when the need arises. It's just like we have preferences, or what we tend to use first, and the approach that we tend to use is going to be the higher result, but it doesn't mean we don't have them all. And like creative, I love talking about creative thinking, so we'll get into that. But it's good to have that self-awareness. And a lot of students, when we go through like the quizzes and questionnaires, they always tell me, I'm not surprised. That's exactly the results I expected. And that's perfectly common. And there's nothing wrong with that. but it's hopefully by the end of the term, we can compare some of these results and there's more improvement, or it's very situational and contextual as well. Like if the situation requires practical thinking, obviously we're all going to employ practical thinking. It's just beyond our comfort. So it's hopefully getting it to a point where you know how to use them all and you can switch it up depending. So we'll get there. But yeah, and I would be probably the exact opposite as you, Justin, because critical thinking doesn't come as naturally to me as creative or practical. And everyone's different. And that's part of the different cultures and different backgrounds.
It's life. It's
absolutely.
As you've grown up, that's what you've attached yourself to, or what you felt you needed to use to keep the clock turning.
Yeah, and a lot of it is not necessarily status quo, but like we as adult learners and just as humans in general, we use a lot of practical thinking in that I did it before, it worked. Why am I going to change? That's practical thinking in a nutshell. And there's nothing wrong with that, because certain situations will require you to go to make a decision based on what did or didn't work in the past. But it's creative in the sense that, is there a different way of approaching that? It doesn't necessarily mean creative in that I'm like artistic and I can paint.
No, you're just looking
creative
outside the box.
Exactly. Yeah, so we'll go into that again when we touch on the thinking skills. But it's cool that some people already have that self-awareness, and it's totally okay if you don't. And I love it even more when your results don't match what you thought in your head. So it's just this whole self-awareness piece that the course tries to encourage you to develop. So the next of the 4 topics is academic integrity. So just keeping in mind these values that, I don't even remember where I took them from. Might have been in the Laurentian policies, but I like that these were pretty straightforward. So like I said on Tuesday, we have a tendency to think that cheating and plagiarism are interchangeable words to academic integrity, but plagiarism and cheating are forms of academic dishonesty or are part of. So the umbrella term is academic integrity, where you're honestly recognizing the work of others or recognizing the lack of work of others. So we'll get into that. And it's the fact that as a university community, you will all be contributing at some point to furthering the knowledge base or the research in a particular discipline. So as a whole, you're expecting these values are respected by everyone and all of your peers. So the fact that you are treated and are treating people fairly, that you're respecting other people's work and point of view, and that you take responsibility if there is a breach of any kind. So the academic integrity policy is, let me double check. There are pieces in the syllabus. I think I linked to the actual policy, like if I'm not mistaken, it's a PDF document. Anyways, it's in there somewhere.
You don't. Most profs put them in almost every one of their syllabus.
They make us. I mean, I like that it's there, but it wouldn't have been my first pick. So there are policies available if you want to actually read the policy itself. I like to present it more so in scenario form, especially if you've lived through something and you want to share it, go for it. If you don't feel comfortable, don't worry about it. But I try to come up with the 3 scenarios that I see most often. Not me in this course, but I just mean in general, what we see students struggle with the most. So I've kind of summarized into 3 scenarios what are representative of academic integrity, keeping in mind that plagiarism and cheating is a part of that. But if you plagiarized, is it the fact that you didn't know how to properly cite your sources? Well, you can't play the, what's that word? I didn't know there's a word for that. The fact that you didn't know how to do something doesn't negate the fact that there was a breach in academic integrity, that you did plagiarize or didn't properly source something. The word will come, ignorance, that's the word. You cannot justify the fact that you didn't know that was the case. So the when in doubt phrase works really well. Just when in doubt, cite. When in doubt, recognize the work of someone else. That's my general rule of thumb. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's what we're here to kind of figure out together in this course. And that's why there's an outline, a draft, and a final version of the essay in particular, so that you're developing the skills of how to do an in-text citation, how to do the bibliography of the work cited, so that you are making sure to respect the values of academic integrity and respecting and recognizing the work of someone else. So keeping that in mind, if I were to give you these 3 tasks or things to do, so how would you prioritize the responses in order of importance? So if I say, what's most important of these 3? To use an effective research tracking strategy. So way back when, I don't remember what they're called. They used to do them on index cards. You have to write like the source and the information that you got it, like what you were taking from the source. Any kind of tracking that says this information comes from here. Is that number 1? Is it just the fact that you're recording everything that you've consulted for a particular research assignment, even if you haven't used them yet? So just like, okay, I went to this site, I looked at it, I'm going to just put it in a list for now. Or is it the fact that what's most important is I need to recognize or distinguish, separate what's my words and ideas from something that someone else said or thought? So is there one, or how would you prioritize those 3 things? Is there one that's more important? Are they all important? Are they all not important? This is a trick question. Do any of you do all of these things, by the way? Yes, no, maybe so?
I believe like distinguishing the word of the author is the most important thing, so you know where to start and like where to start your citations.
Yeah, I never thought of approaching it that way, but yeah, that makes sense.
I also think that using like effective research strategies should be like number 2, like next important. Just because like if you're tracking what is yours and what is not yours, then you know how to properly cite.
Yeah. So Jesse, they are all important. Yeah. So normally when I present this scenario, students can agree that the first and the last are like pretty much equally important. And then there's always debate between the second one, because why am I going to keep track of everything I've ever looked at? This is a lot of extra work for nothing. The downside to that is if you, like, this is really weird to say, but if you didn't know anything on that topic ahead of time, and even just it inspired you to go further, or it made you think of something that technically doesn't belong to you initially. So that's why recording all the sources is one way to ensure that if that was totally new for you, then it should be sourced somewhere. So there is going to be a difference in works cited and bibliographies with things that you've consulted and things that you've actually incorporated, used, or directly quoted in an assignment. We're not doing research papers, so they're going to look slightly different, but the fact that you need to do research for your argumentative essay means that it's important to it's important to develop these skills and use most likely the 2 that I flagged as the first and the last one. But yes, they're all equally important for different reasons. I understand students telling me that the second one is just a lot of extra work for nothing. But I've been in a situation where it's like, oh shoot, I don't remember where this information comes from. So I personally like to just keep everything in a list, and then I go and do like triage afterwards. It's really just find a system. Find a system the minute that you start doing research. Find something that works for you, whatever tracking situation system that you need to be able to identify, like Emmanuel was saying, the words of someone else is like absolutely essential in academic work. But if you don't also associate those words to the source. That's what a lot of students tend to do in their essays with this course. They'll recognize and they'll put it in quotation marks. And it's like, okay, I'm very much aware that this belongs to someone else, but you don't actually tell me who the author is because either you forgot to keep track of it or just the step that you forgot. So little things like that you can start to think about now and have a plan in place when you start doing your research. And that applies across the board. I know that index cards are pretty old school and most people have. I know that like I use my OneNote at work. I keep track of everything in my OneNote. There's the little elephant. What is that guy? Evernote does it. I know that Google has some Google Note options. There's all kinds of technological options that a lot of students already are aware of, but just use something. There's a lot of apps out there that will help you. Just something, even if you're just bookmarking websites, something to keep track of your research is the point of this.
Use Notepad if you have to. It's right in your window.
Just something. Just open a random Word document and just dump everything in it. Whatever you need to do to keep track of everything, do that. Because it will save you the step of having to go back down the line. Because when your bibliography should be done last, because you don't actually know what you're going to use right away. But the fact that you're just like putting it all together and fine tuning it versus you have to redo your research a second time because you didn't track anything. So bottom line, like Justin said, worst case scenario, just put it somewhere and then deal with the rest of the pieces later. But yeah, so I can, Evernote is the only one that's coming to mind right now. And personally, I use OneNote. But I think Google, I don't remember what it's called. Just search it and they'll find like research tracking note-taking systems or apps and use something. So that is a way to ensure that you are respecting academic integrity in the work of someone else is to have something in place before you even start your Google search. The second scenario is the fact that, okay, you will be assigned a group project in this course anyways, mostly because you need to be able to develop the skills to work with people. Even if you don't want to, that's too bad. So you're assigned a group presentation and there are 4 of you. There's 2 people that you work really well with, but there's this 4th person who doesn't show up, shows up late, doesn't contribute, whatever the case may be. We've all been in that situation or we were that person. Could be either way. So you're getting to the final product and you're either it's something that you submit in paper format or it's the presentation, the PowerPoint, let's say. The question here is, do you put the student who didn't work at all or very minimally, do you recognize that person because it was the initial group of 4 that you were assigned? Do you put their name on that work? Is the question. So a lot of students come to me with this question, and it's a really good discussion point for academic integrity and just recognizing the work of others. You were assigned a group of 4. One person did little to no 0 work. Do you put all 4 people's names on that submitted assignment? Justin?
I've actually done it where what we did is the people's names that actually submitted work, their names were put down like you would normally put it on any project. 2 lines below, so spaced out, and in brackets, the last person's name was put on it. Made it stand out to the teacher, and the teacher came back to us and said, what's going on here? Well, we did the work, they didn't, but technically they were in the group. I mean, the teachers, as you would know, if these people are attending class, obviously when I was going to college, we didn't have COVID, but so if the person's never in class, if they've got their own issues with all their other assignments, it's not going to be horridly unexpected to see that there's an issue in the group as well.
Yep, that's definitely one approach, and it's something that, I've had a lot of students who have done that version of things, or I don't want to say it was an extreme, but I've had students, if it were like because they had to submit something visually, so it was like a PowerPoint, they put the initials of the person in the corner. So like JA worked on this slide, and then MM worked on this slide, and then DW worked on this slide. So that was their way of recognizing. It was also their way of like structuring their presentation so they could remember who presented when. That was their way of recognizing it. And then you don't leave the other person stranded, but listen, this is not my work. This belongs to this particular person. So if it's divisible or if there's a way to separate it, students have gone that way. I don't know if anyone has lived through any other situation similar to this, but it's a question that comes up. And number one, like Justin said, the prof is going to know. But at the same time, if it's to the point where you're just, okay, it's the final step and you're just like, do we put the name on or not? That's one situation. The other situation is, what did you do before that to get to that point? So the point, hopefully for the most part, profs are assigning group work to be able to develop interpersonal communication, teamwork, and team building skills. What were the things that you did beforehand so that you maybe avoided the fact that you weren't sure whether or not to put that person's name on the work? So that's something to keep in mind is, and if you took every single step that you possibly could, you still have a professor to be able to talk to. So as an instructor, I've divided groups before. They've shown me everything that they tried to do. And I'm like, okay, you did everything you possibly could to include this person. They're going to be divided and put elsewhere so that they can continue the work and that you're not, it doesn't become an obstacle for you. I've also had students that just did their own thing anyways. That's not the point of the assignment. The assignment is group work. So yes, I'm looking for a particular product, but at the same time, I'm looking to see if you were able to work well with someone that you didn't agree with. I don't agree with my colleagues like 70% of the time, but I can still work with them because we have a common goal. So just keep that in mind, especially when we talk about the debates next week. That's my goal. Yes, it's to be able to formulate an argument that's debatable, but there's going to be some elements in there and some self-reflection and self-evaluation about how you're able to work as a group. So I'm looking for, it's a twofold type of assignment for me. So that's something to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, if that person did absolutely nothing, you're technically not supposed to be putting their name on it. It does not belong to them. So just like you would have to recognize if the work belonged to someone else, the fact that you're putting someone's name on work that does not belong to them is the same situation in reverse. So whether you're omitting someone's name because they didn't work on it, or you're adding someone's name who didn't, is that the same scenario twice? You know what I'm saying, right? I think I just explained the same thing twice. But it's the fact that are you accurately recognizing the work that they submitted? So for me in this course, let me know if there are issues. But in general, ask the prof. At the end of the day, what do you want me to do with this? Do you want me to put their name on it? That's fine. If you don't want me to put their name on it, that's okay. So this one is very much based. It's going to be different. Every time you address this one in particular, it's going to depend on a lot of different factors, the course and the context. But just be aware that it's an option, and for me, just let me know. The third one is something else that comes up very frequently, and I mentioned it briefly Tuesday. So let's say you're writing a history paper, and then you're using or you're basing similar arguments or wording of a poli-sci paper that you submitted. So like I already wrote my political science paper and it's on a super similar subject. I really liked my argument in that political science paper. It's my own work, right? So why can't I'm just going to use it twice. Is that acceptable as is? So I have the political science paper that I submitted to Prof A. Now I'm about to submit my history paper to Prof B. It's similar. Maybe there's an identical paragraph. It's too similar to not have some bell ring in your head. So what's the acceptable solution? You can do this, no questions asked. Obviously, it's both your work. Like, I mean, it's my work in the history course, it's my work in the political science course. I don't have to do anything beyond that. It's still my words and my ideas. You have to ask special permission from the prof of B, because the Prof B is the one that you're submitting now. You have to ask Prof B, is it okay if I submit the same or similar work that I already did in another course? You can do this because they're not identical. There's no issue there as well. they're similar 1 and 3. Or you have to quote yourself. So like Miranda McKenzie would end up in your bibliography as part of paper political science. And I also still need professor permission. So what is the correct answer? There's maybe a little bit of gray area, but not really. You guys just like super not talkative, or just you don't know? Okay, let's look at this the other way.
I'm gonna go with 4.
You can do this if you quote and reference your earlier paper with permission from the prof.
Yeah, that way you have a conversation with the professor, so it's not really hiding anything. And if they have the professor, then you're building on what you already have. And I guess it would make a difference between your first year paper and your 4th year. You're going to be able to add on to and grow your argument.
Yeah, so it's definitely number 4. And there's a lot of different reasons why it has to be number 4. One of the main reasons is this is a breach of academic integrity in 2 different ways. It's the fact that you're not, even though you're the author of both papers, you still need to give yourself credit for the earlier arguments, the earlier paper. I've had to, in my PowerPoints for like a workshop, like a training session or whatever, I've had to quote reference myself. So like there's a bunch of M. McKenzie's in my PowerPoint because I'm pulling out of all these other PowerPoints that I used when I went and it was a conference. Sorry, that's the word I meant. So in a conference, I sourced myself a bunch of times. So you have to recognize that even if it's yourself, if it were anybody else who had written it, you would have had to source it. You would have had to recognize that this is author whoever. So just the fact that you're the author of both has no bearing on the fact that it's still work that was produced and published elsewhere. So that's the first reason why you have to do it this way. Recognizing the work of both authors, even though the author is the same person. Number 2 is because you've most likely, if this was a summative assignment, you were already graded on that paper. So you cannot receive a grade, 2 different grades for the same identical, similar assignment. So that's the other factor that plays into this. So number 1 is recognizing the work of others, but also the fact that I don't want to say you're trying to get away with it because you maybe didn't know any better, but you've already been graded on that particular assignment. You cannot be graded twice for something unless you have some kind of special permission. So those are the 2 things that come into play when we're talking about this particular assignment scenario. So like I said, when in doubt, you source it. You reference yourself as many times as you do. If you're just using the research, that's different. You're just going to put the same sources in your bibliography. But if you're quoting yourself or using similar arguments, then you have to paraphrase yourself as in like, oh yeah, I already thought that in this paper. So just keep that in mind when you're writing things. And if you're not sure, ask your prof. End of the day, just put it in your bibliography. I would much rather see too many things than not enough things in a bibliography or works cited page. Okay, so for the last 5 minutes, we're just going to briefly go over emotional intelligence because it's something else that's going to come back throughout the course, and it'll play into the 2 quizzes surveys that I put in D2L. So for emotional intelligence, this is the last thing that they apply throughout the whole course, the whole university experience. Not only do we have critical, creative, practical thinking skills, we also have emotional intelligence. So here it's the ability, similar to a mindset and being able to see different perspectives and points of view. It's the fact that you're able to understand your own emotions as well as those of someone else, and the ability to use the information to be able to change, guide, adapt your thinking and behavior. So this will play a part in most of the things that you do, but very specifically when you're interacting and communicating with others. I have ideas and intentions and perceptions in my head that are different from the experiences and perceptions of someone else. So it's 1, recognizing that, and how does it affect the way that you're going to speak, act, behave. Okay, so it's, again, self-awareness, keeping that in mind in your interactions with others. Okay, so I think it's very similar, if not very similar to the other definition. So it's the fact that being aware of your emotional intelligence affects both what you think, but how you think. So those are things that we're going to be developing throughout this course. Okay? Any questions about the 4 like mini topics of today? Good to go. All right. So I had a closing activity. I'm going to we'll do it next week. I'm not super concerned. So I put homework in quotation marks. It's not officially homework, but to link to emotional intelligence is the fact that this is going to be, I'm going to try my best. I may omit or forget some from time to time, but every time that something that we talked about or something that I assign is part of the portfolio, I'll try and flag it as such. So this is homework number 1, not anything that you submit now. It's something that's going to be part of your portfolio. It's the fact that I put 2 different quizzes, surveys, in week 1 over here. So emotional intelligence quiz 1 or quiz 2, whichever one you'd like to complete. Get a sense of where you're at right now with your emotional intelligence, and then you'll be able to compare it down the line. So that's your homework, is just answer the quiz, keep track of it. I have students who complete everything and submit me legitimate copies of the PDF or Word document in your portfolio. Some students just keep track of your results, because it's really the results that you're going to compare. So keep track of it however you would like to, but that would be your homework for the weekend. Okay? So any questions about anything that I talked about tonight?
Yes, I do have a question. I was wondering, like, if you had a paper you had written before and you wanted to cite yourself, how would you go about that?
So I'll show you the different referencing and sourcing formats, but you would just, there's a particular way to like order it, for lack of a better word, depending on the type of document that it is. So there's a particular way of doing it if you're sourcing any kind of essay or written work. So there's a way to do it, and whether it's italics, bold, whatever the font rules are, that's going to tell me that it is a previous work, academic. There's a way to source it if you're like referencing a prof's PowerPoint. There's a way that you're going to display the information that tells me it's a PowerPoint. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So just because you've had some questions about it, again, not homework, one really great place to start, if you haven't already been exposed to this and know that it exists, is OWL at Purdue. So it has, and I'll try and find the actual, I think there's actual websites for APA versus MLA, but this is a great place to start if you're not sure of even how to begin when it comes to APA and MLA and how to source things, how to recognize work. So they have the guides here, which should be updated. I'm going to double check. Okay, perfect. So this is everything. So when you're in the actual guide and you're thinking to yourself, well, how do I source this? There should be, I'm not too familiar with the new layout of this page, but there's a place somewhere that says, it's not the best. Yeah, so like reference lists. Okay, what if it's a book? There's a specific rule to follow for that. Or what if it's an electronic resource and it's a website? There are rules and ways to display that information. So I physically had a guide way back in the day. It was a book, but these are the electronic versions. So this is a good place to start if you're not even sure where to begin. But we'll go over this throughout the course for the different format guides. So Emmanuel, feel free to like play around with it and check it out for now. There's also different software available to be able to like generate a bibliography. So we'll go through some of that in due time. But if you want to get a head start or like not sure where to begin, OWL at Purdue is a good place to start. Okay. Anything else pressing for right now? All right. So like I said, email. I stay after class on Zoom if you need anything. Even through D2L, just let me know. Otherwise, you don't have anything to do for Tuesday. All right. So have a good night, everyone. Happy weekend, and I'll see you next week. Oh, I can stop my share.